Good evening and welcome to Swing State. I'm Fox 8 senior political reporter Bob Buckley, and tonight we're finally able to corral that congressional dynamo who rarely stops long enough to have a full half-hour chat with a reporter. North Carolina's 5th District Representative, Congresswoman Virginia Foxx. I mean that in the best way. You're always somewhere doing something, running around, doing the business of your
I have that reputation, Bob. I'm blessed with lots of energy, and I'm going to use it. Well, they say it's better to wear out than rust out, right?
The Neil Young, I think, told us that back in his day. You were born in the Bronx, but you grew up in rural Avery County. Is that about right? Near Beach Mountain, a couple hours west of Winston-Salem?
I was actually born in Manhattan. Wikipedia, you just can't ever get it straight, but I was born in Manhattan. My grandparents did move to the Bronx, and I spent 6 months up there. Dropped out of college because I had no money, went up there and lived with them, slept on their couch in their living room in their little house, and worked down on Wall Street as a clerk typist. You know, best thing I ever did was take typing in high school.
Yeah, we were required to take it at my Jesuit prep school in our first semester. So is it true then that you had no electricity or running water in the house till you were 14?
That is correct. When we moved to North Carolina, my family's very poor. We lived way, way out. Yeah. And in fact, a reporter from the New York Times came to interview me a couple of months ago, and she wanted me to take her and show her. And I took her to where we forded the river to get to the house, but you couldn't get there anymore because trees had grown up, but I at least took her there to see it. So that's true. So I grew up extremely poor. We ate what we grew or killed. My husband grew up the same way. When I met him, he was living in a small 14-foot school bus, which actually still exists. We haven't moved very far from where we grew up because we loved the mountains of North Carolina.
We may have to go see that school bus someday. You went to UNC during a time when they were banning communist speakers on campus. Is that right?
That's correct. I went to Lees-McRae one semester, took time off, went back to Appalachian for a while, got married, transferred to Chapel Hill. And you're exactly right. I can show you, if we went to Chapel Hill, I could show you on Franklin Street exactly where the wall was, where they had the communist speakers on the street of the town, and people were on the other side
of that little stone wall.
Right.
And I bring that up because we're going to talk later about what's going on campuses, and that was a similar era. And then you got your master's and PhD from UNC Greensboro.
Actually, I got my master's from Carolina and my doctorate from UNCG. Yes. Okay.
Taught in both community college level and at Appalachian State before moving into administration of colleges. So what did that experience teach you, and how did it frame how you deal with education issues now in Congress?
Well, it's my background, in my personal background. Growing up very poor, Bob, I understood that a good education and hard work would help me get out of poverty and help me succeed. So it's really a combination of my goal is to have everybody have the same opportunity I had. And I taught at Appalachian, as you said. I taught at community college briefly. My master's is actually in community curriculum and teaching in community colleges. So at Appalachian, I worked with low-income students, and then I became assistant dean, and I did orientation and academic advising. But again, I understood the value of getting a good education, but not always necessarily a baccalaureate degree. Right. I left Appalachian to become the president of Mayland Community College in Avery County, where I'd grown up. So my whole goal is to help people find their passion for work and to connect them with the opportunities for skill development. You know, only 30% of the people in this country have college degrees. Right. So you don't need a college degree to be successful, but what you need are skills that match your God-given skills that will help you then develop them more. And I'm just a big believer in skill development.
And I think that's the message beginning to get through. Our community college system in this state is wonderful. But you are the chair of the Education and Workforce Committee, and a big priority of yours has been reducing the cost of higher ed. But you know, the more we keep throwing money at it, they're just going to absorb it. They're like a sponge.
Oh, you are absolutely right. And what we have to do is give incentives to stop raising tuition. We have a wonderful bill called the College Cost Reduction Act, which will force transparency on the colleges and universities and also hold them accountable for what they do in terms of in the programs that they offer. We do program review. We want the students not to be saddled with debt. Number one, we want them to know from the beginning what their degree is going to cost, how long it's going to take them, what are the chances of getting a job with that degree, and we want the colleges and universities to be upfront about what it's going to cost them, saying how much is it in terms of loans, grants, work study, whatever they need. So,
but at the same time, these schools will tell me, and they have told me, that if they feel it's an arms race, they have to have all these amenities, they have to look more like a country club than the glorified Army bases we went to college on. How do you stop that?
Well, part of it's going to be that individuals are going to have to do that. People are going to have to vote with their feet. But again, if we can cut down the amount of money that people borrow to go to school and then are saddled with the debt, I think that will help a great deal. Transparency and accountability. Those are the two key words in what we're doing in the Education and Workforce Committee.
Only a minute or so left in this segment, but you were at the forum for the American Enterprise Institute put on not too long ago, and you spoke about the differences between free speech and the anti-Semitism you're seeing on college campuses. In the minute or so that we have, how do you define free speech versus anti-Semitism?
Well, we believe in free speech on the committee, and we want to protect free speech. But when you call for the annihilation of an entire people, that is not free speech. That is calling for genocide. And it's very important that we distinguish between the two. Colleges and universities will scream over and over and over again, oh, you're trying to control our speech. Not at all. I'm a huge free speech proponent, but you cannot say nasty things to people, you cannot call them bad words, and you cannot, again, call for the annihilation of an entire country and then put that under the rubric of free speech.
All right, lots more specifics to get into on education, including who should be paying for it and other explosive issues in the country right now. Next. Welcome back to Swing State. Tonight we have North Carolina 5th District Congresswoman Virginia Foxx with us. Right before the break, we were talking about some of these explosive protests on campus and what they mean. I have heard some talk that perhaps the federal government could withhold some of the millions and millions of dollars that provide some of these universities if they don't take care of business and straighten up.
Well, first, Bob, let me make it very clear. I do not believe the federal government should be involved in education at all. It is not outlined in the Constitution as one of the responsibilities of Congress to do. You don't find the word education in the Constitution. So my number one goal would be to get the federal government completely out of education. However, I'm not going to be able to do that. I know that. I'm not going to tilt at that windmill. So my next best effort is to make the money that we do spend in education as efficient and accountable as possible. Now, to go back to your question, it is possible that if these schools are found guilty of violating Title VI or Title VII, that money could be withheld. Now, what these colleges and universities are supposed to be doing is protecting their students. Right. And the Jewish students are not being protected, and that is a violation of Title VI.
You referred to the deal that Rutgers made with the protesters, egregious.
Egregious is correct. Yeah. And what Northwestern did is egregious.
And summarize it just briefly for viewers who may not be familiar.
Well, the students held these demonstrations, and they demanded that the schools do certain things, divest any involvement with Israel and those kinds of things. And you can't let 18-year-olds tell adults what to do. That's just all there is to it. You just can't do that. And so allowing the students to run the universities is a mistake. So we don't need that. But what we need those colleges' presidents and administrators to do is to provide a safe learning environment for all students. But it's the Jewish students who are being particularly harassed and sometimes assaulted, sometimes spit on, sometimes tripped. It's not a very positive situation.
Along that same line, foreign adversaries have, in your words, taken root on college campuses. Do you believe that the Chinese Communist Party, for example, and other rogue adversaries are sending spies or other bad actors here under the guise of being students or researchers?
Oh, I believe that's been happening for a long time, Bob, but I think it's particularly bad now. And we actually have had like 24,000 Chinese come in over the border in the last 3 years.
30,000 just in the last year, yeah.
Right, so it's a lot. Yeah. But yes, I think there are people coming in who have nefarious purposes into our colleges and universities. I think foreign countries like Qatar are giving a lot of money that they expect something in return for. And so we have another bill called the Deterrent Act, where we are asking for the colleges and universities to be more vigilant about the money coming in. We already have a bill, and 70% of the colleges and universities aren't abiding by it.
Are the FBI and CIA on top of this?
Not that we can see.
That's not encouraging.
No, it's not encouraging.
All right. You also worked on the Parents' Bill of Rights Act. Tell me what's involved there.
Okay. We believe that parents should be in charge of their children's education. So we want, under the Parents' Bill of Rights, hope I can remember the 5 things.
Okay.
Number 1, to know what's being taught. Number 1, know where the money's coming from. Know that their children will be safe. Know that their children's private information will not be sold. For parents to be heard at the meetings that the school boards are having. I think that's got them all. Okay. But I'll advise people go on our website and they can read it. It's really a good thing to do. And the state of North Carolina passed a Parents' Bill of Rights, which is modeled after the one we passed.
President Biden has famously moved to transfer student loan debt from the borrower to taxpayers. In fact, he's tried to get about a quarter of it transferred, only so far had about 10% of it successfully transferred. Is this going to stick?
Well, you know, the Supreme Court told the president, no, you cannot pay off these loans. The president then ignored the Supreme Court.
Well, he doesn't pay it off. He's simply transferring it to taxpayers.
Well, you're exactly right. Thank you for making that designation, because I should have done that too. You're right. He has transferred from 13% of the population to the 87% of us who don't own these loans or are not obligated to pay them back. He has transferred them to us. Yes.
So often the problem, I'm always looking down the road and precedents that are set that can be, so once you make this loan, what's going to be next? Is it going to be paying off the guy who didn't go to college but he has a plumbing business? Or are we going to pay off their truck loans that they get and all that stuff? That's the precedent you're setting.
Well, the left makes a distinction on this. Okay. I've brought that issue up too. Exactly that. Why not pay off credit card bills? But no, this was pure and simple buying votes on behalf of the president. He thinks he's not going to get the votes of the young people. But you know what? Most of these loans are not from young people. They are people making more than $300,000 a year. They're people who've been out of school for quite a while.
Often graduate school. Only a little time in this segment. I really need to get to the next thing, which is what do we do about this border? Because there was a bill that your delegate colleague Kathy Manning from Greensboro helped negotiate in the House, which would provide a lot of what Republicans wanted on southern border security. Why didn't that pass?
I'm not familiar with Kathy Manning's bill, but there was a bill in the Senate that began in honest negotiations. I talked to James Lankford about this. He's the senator over there. It began in honest negotiations, but it broke down into being nothing but basically an amnesty bill that would allow millions of people to come into this country every year. But we passed a bill in March of last year, H.R. 2, that really would have brought clear reforms, and the Senate treated it like it was dead on arrival. So my argument to the Democrats who say, well, we had this bill in the Senate, when you won't take it up because of President Trump is, no, you take up H.R. 2 and let's negotiate H.R. 2. It's a much better bill.
Less than a minute left in the segment, but briefly summarize what you want to see done at the border. A complete stoppage of crossings or what?
Absolutely. If you don't have a border, you're not a country.
Yeah.
You're not a country. People should not be allowed to come in here illegally. My father's parents came here legally in the early 1900s. They went through Ellis Island. They were examined to see whether they had any illnesses. Were they going to be dependent on the government? That's what we need. We let in over 1 million people every year, Bob, legally. We're the most generous country in the world in terms of immigration.
There was very little government to be dependent on back then was part of the difference. You can't have an open borders and a welfare society, but we'll get to that a little later. The person representing Congresswoman Fox's party is about to nominate for president, recently got convicted of some felonies. We'll see whether that changes things in the Congresswoman's eyes next. We're back with North Carolina's 5th District Congresswoman Virginia Fox, and the big hullabaloo over the last month or so has been the 34 felony convictions for former President Trump. Do you still support him as the candidate after that?
I do. I certainly do. And can you tell me what those convictions were? I still do not know what they were.
Theoretically, it was about altering an election through paying to have certain stories kept out of the media. That's the legal theory.
Except the altering didn't occur until 2017, after the election was over.
I think the theory was they would have come out earlier.
Well, I know, but
yeah.
I just think President Trump...
It was a novel legal theory.
I think it's a novel legal theory that will not be held up anywhere else but that New York courtroom.
All right, well, let me say this too, though. As a woman yourself and a mother of a daughter, a lot of people will point to President Trump and say he does not have the character requisite of the leader of the free world, that the character matters and his is lacking. How do you respond to that?
Character matters, but I do not believe that what's happening to President Trump is the way our system is supposed to operate. It is absolutely not the way. And none of us is perfect, Bob. I know you're a person of faith. I'm a person of faith. And none of us is perfect.
Well, the older I get, the more I say grace should play a role in all of our lives with the people we deal with. I'm fortunate enough to get emails pretty much every day from the Biden campaign with various claims, and one that they sent me recently included an Axios News opinion column claiming that President Trump would seek retribution and put those who came after him, like New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who got the hush money conviction we just talked about, in jail. They quote former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, who is due to head off to prison next month. I mean, what's your sense as a member of the Republican Party about whether President Trump would try to make himself a dictator? That the Biden campaign tells me that all the time in these emails. He's going to try to make himself a dictator, and that he's going to put his political opponents in jail.
Well, as people will remember, I believe, since it was just 8 years ago, he did not try to put Secretary Clinton in jail.
Right.
She committed a lot of crimes, and he did not put her in jail. And I have heard him say that he thinks that was the right thing to do, and he is not going to continue this situation because it's going to tear our country apart. I'm going to take him at his word and say that if he's saying it now, and I'm going to accept that and believe that he is going to do everything he can to stop this. We know the American people are forgiving people. They forgive people in office as well as people in their church every day for sins they've committed.
We hear a lot from the Biden administration now about how they're going to get the economy moving, they're going to reduce costs, et cetera. I'm not so sure there's a lot the government can do on that. Governments tend to get in the way more than they do fix problems. Forgive me, even though it's your career here. What do you want to see done on the economy?
Well, I want to see the government stop spending money, so I do disagree with you. The reason we have the inflation we have right now and have had for the last 3.5 years is because soon after he got into office, President Biden spent $6 trillion. He and the Democrats, who were in the majority, spent $6 trillion. And when the government sucks all that money out of the private economy, look, Bob, we had a great economy under President Trump, the best we'd ever had, because we had tax cuts. I was part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and it was a bill Paul Ryan had worked on for 20 years. And when we passed that bill, the revenue coming into the federal government was fantastic. We have the highest revenue coming in now we've ever had.
But the challenge, though, too, is there was a global supply chain hitting a brick wall. So it was a combination of all this extra money chasing fewer goods because the supply chain had essentially died like it never had before in our history.
Well, yes, that's true, and we're still recovering from it.
Yes.
But when you, on top of that, put out $6 trillion from the federal government, you just exacerbate the issue. And we do not need the federal government spending the kind of money that it's spending. We need to pull back on spending. I'm a big believer in that. I want the federal government to be as lean as it possibly can be. We're doing things we have no business doing.
If you look at the budget deficits starting for the last 10 years, they start at below 500, right around $500 million, and they go up to 3.1 trillion when the deficit, or when the pandemic hit. And the total is more than $14 trillion of debt, 14.29 trillion over the last 10 years just of borrowing. President Bush's last budget in 2008-09 was only 2.9 trillion total.
Listen, I was in Congress. I got elected in 04. In 05, Hurricane Katrina hit. There was a bill to pay $59 billion at one time for Hurricane Katrina. I voted against it. I was one of 11 people. I went up to Mike Pence on the floor and I said, don't tell me you're conservative. You should have had offset this $59 billion. And he said, you're right. He went to the RSC. We cut $39 billion out of the federal government that year. In 2006, the CBO said in 2017 we'd have a surplus of $358 billion. We know how to cut spending.
Just a few seconds left here. I have to ask you, you've been doing this in Congress for 20 years, 10 in the state Senate before that. How long are you going to, because you're now the dean of our delegation. How long do you want to keep doing this?
You know, I always say the Lord has blessed me in my last 5 jobs, in telling me exactly what to do and when to do it. And so I'm looking for the right sign. I'm really at the peak of my career by being chair of the Education Committee right now. And I'll invite anybody to come up to DC and spend a day with me and see if they can keep up.
Fair enough. All right, that is it for tonight. Please tune in or set your DVR to record Swing State each week to get the kind of in-depth look at the key issues that shape our community. We'll see you next time.